All right, testing. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, we got AV in the background there in case I get too loud. My mom or my wife says I got a voice that carries. I don't know if I'm going to be on stage or if I'm going to be right here, but either way, I was at O'Hare yesterday for I think 10 hours. So if I'm a little bit groggy today, it was a little bit of a rough travel day, but I made it. Thought I was going to miss it. Looking forward to talking to you all about the topic du jour. I changed the working title, so sorry, Pam and team. But this is the Institute for Leadership, right? So we're going to be talking about leading as an employer of choice. So again, my name is Jay Carlisle. I've been with LinkedIn, which is a Microsoft wholly owned subsidiary now for about 5 years. And I'm very passionate about finding a way that cities, counties, and states can level the playing field for talent acquisition in the modern era. And then with me I have Ken. Ken will introduce himself more formally in a minute when I hand it over to him. His part's way better than mine, so just be ready. Yeah, look forward to the conversation. There is going to be a quick activity, so if you see one sheet of paper, had some travel difficulties again. There's supposed to be one per person, I got one per table. So we're going to roll with it. So let's talk about government work, right? What was, or still really is government work, but what was the brand the government used to have, right? It was a stable employment, offered good retirement, good benefits, good pension, steady scheduling, right? That was what government work was looked at for the longest time, and still can be, but if you look at, next slide, there we go. Where's Bob with NeoGov? Right there. They just recently released their Quiet Crisis in the Public Sector Report, and we're seeing that job applications by their statistics are up by, I don't know, 50%-ish, right? Jobs are up, but applications are down. So if you ever watch Top Gun 1, it's inverted, right? So there's something that's going on. And I think the private sector has seen this too, but they've been able to rebound a little bit quicker and a little bit better. So if you look at this PBS report, you see that the private sector employment's almost back at full pre-pandemic levels, but the public sector is still trailing behind. And I think that Dan Bogle here said it best, right? You've got a generation of young people who are probably the most purpose-motivated than ever before, but there's something missing about how we're communicating what it means to be a public servant and the opportunities to do impactful work, right? If you please remember communicating, right? We have to talk about how we're communicating what you all do. So what do we do about it? You heard this quote. I'm not going to repeat it, but we got to do something different. So what is an employer of choice, right? So that's what we're trying to talk about today is how do you become an employer of choice in this very competitive talent landscape or marketplace? Well, an employer of choice is the organization's ability to attract and retain the best candidates with the desired organizational culture, leadership, and high employee engagement. And it's not necessarily about salary and terms. From Janice Hayden, an executive coach, for more information down there, right? Culture, leadership, engagement. Yes, salary is important, but it's not the only factor. I don't really like agenda slides, so this is the closest thing that I created to an agenda slide. This is what I'm talking about customers on a day in and day out basis, right? How do you plan, hire, develop, and engage your next generation of public servants? Underneath these, I'll take a minute. I'm not going to read through all of them, but you'll see some bullets. You'll have these slides later, but this is not the absolute recipe, right? There's no silver bullets, right? But here are some great frameworks, some great things to take a look at. Are your states doing these things in almost every single category? And if you're not, how do we work towards finding a plan for you to be doing some of these things to making yourself to be that employer of choice? Oh, there's my build slide. All right, so let's start with plan. First, we need a plan. Hopefully it's a little bit more elaborate than a little Kevin McAllister's plan from Home Alone, but that's what you need to do, right? You need to come up with a plan. Best place to start with the plan is you need to self-assess. Anybody remember Scantrons? All right, there we go. We're live today, Monday morning. But you do need to self-assess, right? You need to understand where your talent, what are the skills that you need? What are the skills that you have? What are the open roles? What are the soon-to-be open roles? What is your retirement looking like? What's your attrition rates? And then also, what's your employee engagement looking like? Are your coworkers and employees engaged in your organization? So real quick show of hands. First classroom participation activity. Who here is serving their employees in some way, shape, or form? All right, I don't know who our corporate sponsors are, so it looks like about a third to half the room. Good. Now the question is, are you asking the questions and really finding out what matters, right? We talked about it just a minute ago, or I talked about it just a minute ago. The culture piece. It's how you do what you do in the workplace. I'm not going to read that bottom sentence, right? But it's the culture is the how you do it. And the leadership are the people that bring that forward, right? I'm going to read this Steve Jobs quote because I really like it. Management is about persuading people to do the things that they do not want to do while leadership is about inspiring people to do the things they never thought they could, right? Good leaders breed good culture and create more engagement with your organization. The level of your employees' commitment to that organization. And these things, I love these build slides, they're a flywheel, whatever you want to call it, right? They're all engaging with each other, or they're all synchronous with each other. When you have good culture with good leadership, breeds high engagement, and that keeps spinning. And there is really a watershed moment right now for organizational culture. Peter Drucker, I think was the name. Yeah, he says culture eats strategy for breakfast. And this is a crazy time, right? We had a once in theory, hopefully, 100 years pandemic, a plague, for the lack of a better term. You've got crazy millennials and Gen Zs. I'm kind of sort of one. I'm like more Gen X-ish. I don't really know. But these are digital natives. It's a totally different generation, right? And if you don't, people talk about them being coddled and babied. And I was at a recent conference, I think it was actually NASPE, where the presenter was like, and you know what? It's your fault. You raised them. So anyway. And then there's the great reshuffle, or the great resignation, right? So there's a lot of powerful forces in play right now at the exact same time, and culture is bleeding to the front end. LinkedIn recently did a study. This was our talent trends for 2022. And we asked job seekers, what are your top priorities when looking for a new job? 63% actually listed work-life balance over compensation and benefits and colleagues and culture, which I know we just said culture was important. But work-life balance is trumping compensation, right? Private or public sector can play here. I'm gonna skip that slide. And companies, this is another article here. This is they're saying that companies are shedding their toxic workplaces amid the great resignation, right? People have a choice today. If you have a toxic workplace environment, you don't have a positive culture, people are just up and leaving. And we've seen this. You know this, we've seen this. Looking at some more statistics about culture, right? LinkedIn, social media, professional social media platform, we're able to see a lot about what's going on when people are communicating, when people are networking. And we're seeing that there is a 2 times or 100% increase in job views when that job is talking about culture, you're talking about the benefits, you're talking about the things that are going on within the organization. Twice as many people are looking at those jobs. 67% higher engagement on posts that organizations are putting out there when they're talking about publicly how great their culture is, right? These things are having an impact on what you're putting out there in the world. And again, LinkedIn members are posting more about these key topics. I just mentioned work-life balance, flexible work. From 2019 to 2021, a 362% increase about people on LinkedIn talking about flexible work. That's a huge increase. Obviously, I think we know the reasons why, but that's a major number. 35% well-being. So when we're talking about flexible work, is it going to keep building? I'm going to let Ken come up here for a minute to talk a little bit about hybrid work culture. Ken?
Oh, you have it. Morning, everybody. This thing on? Excellent. And I love this setup. We've got a podium, we've got comfy chairs, and we're going to use the floor. So, as Jay indicated, there's a lot of signals, a lot of trends right now in flexible work, hybrid work, and we see this as a real watershed moment and opportunity for organizations. To respond to the pandemic, we all created digital processes that allowed people to work from home. And then we just never really, we've got people coming back, they can carry on into the future, but we see this as a real opportunity, not only from a cost savings perspective with those processes still in place, but from an employee recruitment and an employee retention opportunity. So Microsoft publishes what we call our Work Trend Index report every year. And basically what it is, it's a compilation of 2 different kind of data points, if you will. One is a huge survey of 30,000 people across 30 countries. It's not specific to PubSec, it does cover commercial, but it does give us a pulse as to what's happening out in the labor market. And then the other thing that we kind of correlate that with is the signals that we get from running the Office 365 service. Although we don't track individual people, we do see trends about spikes in activity and things of that nature. So we'd like to share a little of those findings with you. So the report really goes around 5 different areas. The first being employees have a new worth it equation. What they give versus what they get. And as Jay talked about, it's not really about or solely about money anymore. Probably never was, but even less so now. Second thing is managers are pinched in the middle, right? We've got employees that have just spent 2 years working at home. Their patterns, their preferences for how they ran their home lives has changed in how that interacts with work. So we need to make the office commute worthwhile. This isn't about perks and what's in the break room. This is about what happens when an employee hits the office and how they interact with their peers and how they get their work done. The other thing with flexible work is we've got people now, their home is their workplace, right? How do we separate those places? How do we create boundaries? For people that have flexible hours, how do we make sure that somebody's work hours doesn't impact the rest of the organization negatively? And then social capital. Offices are a fabric. They're a fabric of people, and when people aren't showing up to those offices, we need to create those bonds, because that in some ways is the strength of the organization and the resiliency of the organization. So the last 2 years has reshaped priorities. The data shows us that people, at least on paper when they're surveyed, say they're prioritizing health, well-being, and family over work priorities. This number goes up even more when you narrow in on the demographic of parents and also women. The great reshuffle, resignation, whatever you want to call it, that we all went through in 2021 is not over. The signals are still very strong that millennials and Gen Z, so essentially that 40 and under crowd, that next batch of up and coming leaders, they are very interested in still considering new work opportunities around a couple of topics, but work culture is a big one. One that should resonate strongly with this crowd, sense of purpose, which we don't always necessarily have in commercial environments, and also flexibility. So super important we stay attuned to this. So ripped from the headlines, I've redacted some of the names to protect the innocent. I don't know if these necessarily touch anybody here, but the reality is remote work is here to stay. We see significant increases from where it was pre-pandemic. We also see job postings 5x what they were before the pandemic. Now, what's really interesting about this, there's some real tension in the system right now. So we've got roughly 50% of organizations saying they want everybody back to the office if they're not already. We've got 52% of our employees saying they're considering remote or hybrid work models for the upcoming year. So folks are trying to get back to where they were. So it's really important as leaders that we thread that needle to kind of manage employee expectations. The other piece that the data shows us is 80% of employees will tell you, those that are working at home, they're more productive or equally as productive at home as they are in the office. Leadership will tell you, 54% of them, that they are less productive when people are not in the office. So we need to figure out a way to thread that needle. And more importantly, from the managerial perspective, they need to figure out a way to balance employee expectation, leadership priorities, and then for those that are implementing hybrid, recognizing that it's not just simply a relocation of a desk, but how we go about and implement hybrid workspaces or hybrid culture in our environment is going to be the key factor of if we're successful about it and really get the opportunities both for the employee and the organization. So we need to sort of rethink the office and why people come to the office and what they get from that office when they're there. Now, this is an office. This is also a treehouse. I'm not suggesting anybody put this in their budget for next year. However, this is a unique space, but we really need to think about what we're doing in our offices. So we learned early on in the pandemic about what we call the hybrid paradox. Sounds very fancy. Basically what it means is about half of your employees, when they want to come to the office, it's because they want quiet time. Think about a parent who's got little kids at home, they need to come into the office, they need to get away from the noise. Or think about somebody earlier in career. I always think about, somebody in that apartment in Manhattan with 4 roommates, right? And they're all banging away, getting work done. They need to get some quiet time. The other half of your workforce want to come in for socialization. They want to make connections with their peers, they want to see their leader, whatever they want to do, they're looking for to, again, create part of that fabric. So we need to think about these spaces in the context of both focus and private time and also collaboration. We also need to rethink our meeting rooms and our conference rooms. So it wasn't that long ago that if somebody was dialing into a meeting remote, there'd be a whole group of people back in the office, they'd be at a big conference table, there'd be a speakerphone in the middle, they'd do their meeting, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end of the meeting, somebody would go, hey, Joe, are you still there? And Joe had checked out 45 minutes ago because he couldn't see what was on the whiteboard. He couldn't really kind of hear what's going on. And frankly, if he wanted to interject and say something, nobody saw his physical body language to kind of let people know, hey, I got something to say, and then the topic moved on. So we really need to rethink what these spaces look like. So there's no second-class citizens. So if somebody is in that room or somebody participating remotely, they can see the whiteboard. They have a full advantage of what's going on in the room. And not only that, if Joe is the one presenting in that room, The space is created such that somebody who's sitting in the back side of that room, not near a big screen like this, has a point of view about what Joe's trying to share on the screen. So 40% of hybrid workers say their biggest challenge with hybrid work is knowing when to come in the office. So that's one of the reasons why at Microsoft, for folks that are implementing hybrid work, we talk about establishing an actual hybrid work policy and what that means. And really what it does is it lays the groundwork of, hey, when are you expected to show up? What are the important moments in our business, whether it's quarter end, weekend, this meeting, to make sure you're in the office and being present. And then it also sets ground rules for what it's like when you're not in the office. Hey, you know what? We expect you to be available between this hour, and for these meetings, we expect you to be camera on. So, other piece of data we got from the pandemic. Teams meeting minutes went up 252% since 2019. There's a lot of things that go into that data that probably are a little bit, I wouldn't say questionable, but skew the data. But what we do know is since before the pandemic, all of our work days has extended 46 minutes. So I don't know what people, somebody said hybrid work, you work less. That hasn't panned out for many of us. The other thing we've seen, significant increases not only in after hours work time, but also weekend work time. So as people expand their day, it's important that we're cognizant that not everybody is working alongside of us and we're respectful of other people around us. So with that, I want to share just a few best practices that as leaders we should all be modeling, because we know how important work-life balance is to our employees. They're telling us. So first one, and I love, we all have too many meetings. Rethink your meetings. If you've got an opportunity to dive into a topic, you need some critical debate, put it in a chat. Give everyone an opportunity to weigh in that can't make that meeting. You'll find that a chat, in certain cases, are a better place for decision making. A, because it lets some of the emotion out of the room. B, it can be more inclusive. And C, it allows people an opportunity who would weigh in but don't want to necessarily raise their hand when there's a tense meeting going on to contribute in a thoughtful way at a spot where they think is important. The second one, my personal favorite, sorry, didn't know I was loaded. My personal favorite, nowhere have I ever found that 60 minutes and 30 minutes is an optimum meeting length. I don't know who established that. They're bad. I've set all my default meetings to be 25 minutes or 55 minutes and start either 5 minutes after the hour or 35 minutes after the hour. We're all in back-to-back meetings. Give people a chance to get from one, get a drink of water, do it, take care of what they need to take care of, and come to your meeting prepared to contribute versus coming in after the agenda and halfway in the meeting and frazzled and they got an email they gotta get off. Be respectful, give people that opportunity to come to that meeting and be present. And then last but certainly not least, use delay email when you're sending an email out after hours if it's not hypercritical for that moment. Had a really interesting point in an internal conference call a year or two ago. Senior leader was on the thing. He said, I sent an email out on a Saturday morning, unintentionally wrecked 3 people's weekends. Sender doesn't know. We're all leaders in this room. You send a message out, people go, oh crap, I got an email from so-and-so, I got to react to this. Make sure you set expectation. If it's not important, leave them alone on their time off. Rebuilding social capital. Basically the benefits we know and we get from people we know. Now, this isn't to be nepotism and things of that nature, but it's essentially those connections that we've made over time being in the office, knowing that person in IT that when we're really in a jam, we can kind of circumvent the help desk to get to. Or that person in accounting that we need when we need a really cool data visualization. Super important that these connections happen, and as leaders for our remote workers, especially our new employees, we need to make sure we're giving them the space to build these. Biggest problem with remote work, according to leaders, is building this social capital and building this fabric. One of the things we learned in the pandemic, we all went home, email traffic, chat traffic went through the roof. Trust me, I saw the stats, it went through the roof. What we also saw was the communication with our immediate teams went 10x. Our communication with people outside of our immediate teams dropped. So when you think about innovation in an organization, when you think about breaking down silos, when you think about driving your organization forward, we have to make those connections to keep people communicating and connected outside of their immediate teams, or we're going to stagnate. So what can we do as leaders? Some simple things, right? Inviting people to a team meeting from outside of your direct team, right? The other thing we need to do for those rising stars in our organization, we need to make sure we're giving them space to build those network connections. If you're working 60 hours a week, you don't have time to invest in what so-and-so's doing in a different department. And then frankly, we need to think about rewarding people who are contributing to the work of others. I mean, that's one of our measures in Microsoft, right? I have my core priorities. I have the ideas and the work I do that builds on the ideas of others and how I'm contributing to the success of others. And then make sure when you are in your meetings, you're being inclusive. You're bringing people in, you're making sure all voices are heard, so we're not getting just those loudest or those type A people in the meeting and just have only their opinions being recognized. So with that, I hope this was interesting. I'll be around for the next couple of days. Love to double click on these topics some more, and I'll turn it back to Jay.
Awesome. Am I still on? Oh, I am back on. All right, cool. Thank you. Another classroom participation activity. How many people use the delayed send on their emails after hours? That is my favorite thing to do as a people manager. I send all of them. They get 9 emails from me at 8 a.m. magically, but I do it all the time. So if you don't know about the delayed email, it's a fantastic feature. To your point, I do not like getting emails and Teams from my boss, hence I don't do that to my people. All right, so we talked about all the goodness that we're going to work on when it comes to culture, engagements. We're going to keep talking about those in a minute. But all of those things, your work setup, your work-life balance, all those things, that is part of your brand. Your culture is your brand externally, or what you put out there is your brand externally, right? So your reputation, your brand, think employer value proposition. And brand and employer brand oftentimes go very hand in hand. I'm guessing many of you know these logos. They just so happen to also almost all be either LinkedIn top companies, Glassdoor best places to work, or something similar. And I believe Tennessee was here. I think I saw Christy earlier presenting. Christy, do you remember these logos? And now they look like this, right? I love this. From somebody from the private sector, if it will go back. I don't know if it'll go back. The previous slide was super confusing, and I know the DOT loves their brand. I know IT loves their brand. And I'm not saying you need to go through a completely rebranding, because that's not all it is. That's not the silver bullet to attracting more people from the private sector. But having somebody that doesn't necessarily know government understand that this is how government looks and operates is just so crisp and so clean. So kudos to Tennessee to going through this effort. In SHRM, everybody respects SHRM, right? They say branding matters. Use your company's brand to find the best hires. Your company's reputation, company and organization, sorry, this was, when this says company, sometimes obviously we talk organization. But your organization matters when you're trying to recruit and retain employees. All right, we're gonna do a quick activity. Again, I didn't get in until 9:30 last night. I was supposed to go to FedEx office and print out a bunch of these. So instead of getting one per person, you get one per table. But if you wouldn't mind spending the next, we'll say 7 to 10 minutes, potentially, on the circle, together, in the left circle, put 3 to 5 things, words, stick figure drawings, about why you joined the public sector, public service. And then on the right-hand side, 3 to 5 words or drawings about why you've stayed. So I'm gonna set the timer. And talk amongst yourselves, fill it out. We're not gonna share publicly, but I'd love for you to go through this exercise. at NASP, you may recognize this activity. I borrowed it from a gentleman that did this for a different purpose and tailored it for this, this event. But I thought it was really, really compounding. This can go for everything in your life, whether it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, to where you're at from a socioeconomical standpoint. This activity can really kind of help open your eyes to like what you know, because these are your lenses for what you, in this case, see from public sector. But what you need to do with this information is you need to tell this story to others. I had a realtor when I was selling a condo back in Chicago. I'm in Chicago, by the way. And one of the first questions he asked me is, why'd you buy the place? And I was like, it wasn't about like, what are the square feet? How many bedrooms does it have? This, that, and the other. He's like, why did you buy it? Because that's what he wanted to use to sell my house. There was a compelling reason that I bought this place. Why did you buy it? He wanted to know. And I just thought that was a great, like, intuitive question for him to ask me. So let's talk about boosting your employer brand, right? So this line here, we're going to talk a little bit about how do you, if you don't have an employer brand or you haven't put some time into it, how do we take an employer brand, build upon it, improve it, and put it out there into the world, right? This gentleman here from GitLab is saying that we're shifting away from compensation and moving into what the mission and vision of the company, or in this case, organization, is. This is a perfect time for government to step in, lean in, and tell your story. So how do we do this? One, we talked a little bit earlier about listening to your people, right? And it's not just about surveying your people. It's getting into employee resource groups, right? Do you have ERGs for your DIBS initiatives or DEI initiatives? Talking to them, right? Are you doing exit surveys? Are you doing why you got hired surveys or why you chose this survey, or even question and answers, right? Talk to your people. Are you doing skip levels? Are you talking to people two levels below you, right? Really get in the weeds and start talking to your people, understanding what's important to them, and what do they say about your culture as it sits today. Also, be willing to change your messaging. I know government loves their 5-year plans, and then they put them online, push them somewhere, and let them sit. Times are changing very, very fast right now. A 5-year plan or a 5-year employer value proposition may not have the shelf life that it once did. Also, I love this so much. Get leaders talking about your culture. Does anybody know, who here is from Missouri? Is anybody from Missouri? Awesome, hello. Mayor Lucas for the city of Kansas City, he is the best follow on LinkedIn. If you want a government official or a government elected leader to follow on LinkedIn, Mayor Lucas, he's phenomenal. I've never seen a person more proud for the city, county, and state that they live in than Mayor Lucas. I want to work for him, right? And the other thing is, people want information today. When I first joined LinkedIn, one of the first things I did was I got on LinkedIn and I got on YouTube and I listened to Jeff Weiner. Does anybody remember Jeff Weiner, the former CEO of LinkedIn? I am captivated about what leaders are trying to do, right? Are they inspiring? I challenge all of you to find your voice, or other people within your organization to have a voice, and get out there and tell your story. Does anybody know who Pixar is? Show of hands. All right, I'm gonna give you a quick recipe. This is not mine, this is Pixar's. And you don't have to use it. You can send this over to your comms team. But this is how they start every single movie that they make. It's as simple as this. Once upon a time, it's where they introduce the hero, or the subject of the story. Every day describes the situation, how things were, or they once were, until one day, something happens, a call to adventure, some sort of action. And then because of that, something else happens. Because of that, they face challenges, hurdles, they make decisions, until finally, they live happily ever after. And that's how you tell a story. Not like that, actually. That was a terrible story. But using this framework, that is how you would tell a story, right? So if you don't take it from anybody, take it from Pixar. They know about Woody. They know about Buzz Lightyear. They know how to tell a story, right? And you don't have to use these exact fill-in-the-blank sentences, but take this framework, send it over to your comms team, and use this for how to capture people's attention. Now let's talk about recruiting. Recruiters in government historically have been more resume reviewers than true recruiters. Recruiting in the modern era is more like sales and marketing, right? And these are the people that are on the front lines that are helping scan for culture, help culture coming into the organization, and not to any degree retaining culture, but deciding if somebody's a culture add or a culture detractor. So what can these recruiters use, and what can you, I guess, deploy? What tools can you give them? An up-to-date employer value proposition. These millennials and Gen Zs that we like to rag on all the time, they can smell BS a mile away, right? If you're blowing smoke up there, you know what, with your employer value proposition, but you're not actually putting it into practice in your organization, they're going to sniff that out real quick and they're going to be gone. It's extremely expensive to hire somebody, attrit them, and then rehire them. Pressure test your employer value proposition. Make sure it's truthful and authentic. Speaking of being authentic, I knew I made these slides. Be authentic, right? This is where you need to be humble if you don't have all the answers, right? Or you need to be making sure that you're telling the story that is the truthful story, and then investing in onboarding. We at LinkedIn, we realized that our onboarding practice wasn't great, especially when we came into the pandemic, right? That first experience is a lasting experience, right? So making sure that you're having maybe a buddy system. We now assign somebody inside the organization that they're a buddy. For the first, I think it's like 6 months, this person is almost like a player coach for them. But finding a way to make sure that you're onboarding people so they have a good early experience, because that early experience is a lasting experience. And social media. It doesn't have to be LinkedIn. I'm biased. I like LinkedIn. But you need to use LinkedIn. You need to use social media to get your story out there. The younger generation, they are on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, Snapchat, whatever it is. That's where they're finding information, right? So you need to make sure you have a voice and you're using these platforms to tell the world your story. And a quick statistic, this is not from us, this is from, I think it was Hootsuite. Hootsuite, they found that you're finding 50% more hires by making sure that you're using social media for hiring and branding and all the other things that go with it. All right, so we talked a little bit about planning. Let's talk about hiring. Who here is having an easy time with hiring? All right, we got one. I like it. All right. Does anybody remember this? Where you used to hang a for-hire sign on the window, people would come in droves, you put it in the newspaper, put it on a job board, you get tons of applications. And they'd apply, and then maybe if it's civil service or merit, they have to take an exam, sit for an eternity, maybe get their name called, and then they eventually have an interview, and then they join, right? Do me a favor, think about the last time you bought something significant, nothing crazy, not a house, but like a refrigerator, lawnmower, maybe even a car. Think about all the research you did before you stepped onto that car dealership into Home Depot or wherever it is. Where'd you go? Google, CNET, Motor Trend. I'd put something else, but Google. Usually it's Google. Could be Bing. Got to go to Bing, right? But you're doing a ton of research, and that's just for a lawnmower. Think about what people are doing for a job. I'll tell you a quick story about how I joined LinkedIn. I was at an IT reseller, for lack of a better term, CDW, if anybody knows CDW. I've been there for 15 years. Wasn't planning on going anywhere. Thought I was going to be the next CEO. Then all of a sudden I got a message from somebody at LinkedIn that said, hey, we like your background. We think you'd be a good fit. Would you be interested in talking about this role that we have in building out this government practice? I didn't respond to that email. I thought. I did some research. I got on different channels to do some information gathering. I got on LinkedIn, and I found that my brother's ex-girlfriend who lived in California worked for LinkedIn. So I checked with my brother first, of course. I said, hey, are you guys cool? Like, are you guys on good terms? Do you mind if I talk to her? He's like, yeah, we're fine. So I reached out to her name. Her name is Chris. I said, hey, Chris, my name's Jay. I don't know if you remember me. I'm Kevin's older brother. I see you working at LinkedIn. Would you recommend it? And we had a conversation. She told me the good, the bad, the ugly, and different. She gave, net, she gave it 2 thumbs up. So then, I think 4 or 5 days went by. I finally replied to that email or that in-mail and said, you know what? Yeah, I'll have a conversation. I never once thought I'd be going in from like selling cybersecurity and doing all this crazy technology to going into HR. But they changed my mind. I was able to do the right information discovery. I was able to talk to the right people. I was not sold by anybody at Best Buy or the Ford dealership. I did my own research, and I found the information that I wanted and was corroborated with others. And this is the path that people are going today, right? Who knows the term post and pray, post and hope? Right? Very, very commonplace in government today. You're trying to hope that the right person with the right skill set is looking for a job at the right time that you happen to have a job posted on the platform that they're searching on. That is lightning in a freaking bottle. You need to warm people up. And this is from ERE. They're talking about Gen Z suggesting updating your hiring practice. Uh-oh. These are digital natives. I love the quote in here. It says something. They could scroll before they could walk. And I thought about that. What do you mean? I just think I've got a 5- and a 7-year-old. They were thumbing through my phone before they were walking, right? These are digital natives. They need their hiring practice to be as advanced as the world that they live in, right? And if you can't meet them where they're at, they're going to go look somewhere else. They're also talking about if you don't have updated hiring practices or an antiquated system, they're out. And they're expecting it to last 5 weeks, which actually I was kind of surprised by. I thought they wanted to be in like 3 days. But ICEMS, an applicant tracking system, is saying that they are expecting it to last no longer than 5 weeks, which some of you I know within that, 35, 40-day range. I know some are 60, 90 days. So we're going to work on some of those things. Does anybody know what this is by chance? I'm not going to go there. I mentioned that recruiters need to be more like marketers. This is a marketing funnel, right? You're taking people that have no idea what it's like to work at the state. I'm in Illinois, so I'm going to say state of Illinois. They have no idea. You're slowly making them aware. You're giving them information. You're putting things in front of them. They're able to consume content so they become aware that the state isn't just the DMV. No disrespect to anybody that's worked at the DMV. They're aware. They become engaged with your content. Now they're wanting to find out more. They're interested about whatever else is going on, so that they are considering when they decide to change jobs, they remember you as the place they potentially will want to come work. You're not hoping to find them right in that moment when they're looking to change jobs, right? It's taking a ton of people who are unaware about something and bringing them down the funnel so they're ultimately considering and so they become considering and ultimately apply. And this is kind of the same graph, but on its side with an extension of sorts. So you're taking somebody that's a citizen that becomes an employee and then ultimately becomes a brand ambassador. This is our goal. This is utopia, right? You're making them unaware to apply, to become an employee, and now what? Now you got to keep them engaged. You need to develop them, give them career paths. So they say that the state of Illinois, and the analogy I'm just going to keep using because that's where I live, is the best place to work in Illinois. So how do we do that? Again, through the agenda slide that I have here of development and engaging, right? You can see the bullet points there. I'm not going to read them, but these are the things you need to keep in mind when you're working towards this strategy or this plan. We talked about improving culture, right? It starts with professional development. Professional development's hard. It doesn't scale very well, especially in a hybrid work-life or a hybrid environment. But 59% of respondents are saying these are the areas you need to, or professional development is the area you need to invest in to improve culture, along with flexible work, mental health and wellness, improving managers, and diversity and inclusion. I know none of you have a disengaged workforce, so the 29% that aren't here, you're the 29%, and the 71% of the people that aren't here, according to, I think it's Gallup, have a disengaged workforce. And it costs a ton of money, right? Lack of productivity, whatever the case may be, not being able to get jobs done. Disengaged workforce is expensive, and nobody wants to be in an ultra disengaged environment. So your top performers are going to leave. It's a vicious cycle. And unfortunately, you can't have a ton of people leaving because you probably are also seeing a retirement wave forthcoming. This is a federal statistic, but we see that state and local governments mirror this, that about 17% of the federal workforce is under the age of 35. Oof. And skills are changing constantly. I don't know if this is the slide that says it or another one, but there's a statistic that there's many jobs today where the core skills that they need to do their job didn't even exist 3 years ago, which is confounding to me. A skill that didn't exist, now you need it. Back to SHRM. SHRM always knows these things, right? Developing and sustaining employee engagement. There's a bunch of great stuff on this slide. You'll get this slide. Training and development is front and center. Well, what if we invest in all these people, we train them up, and then they go? Better question is, what if you don't and they stay? I don't know if you've seen this. I guess it's a political cartoon. The CEO talking to the CFO. It's true. People are going to leave. To the state of Missouri again, Casey Osterkamp, I had a great conversation with her. She said, we know we're not going to have people for 30 years. We're going to get them from 3 to 5. And we're going to get the best 3 to 5 years out of these employees as we possibly can. They know that. And just more and more, I mean, this is all out there. It doesn't sound logical to invest in people that you know are going to leave. But you have to if you want the best talent today. You need to invest in employee development. You need to invest in career pathing, leadership development. If you're known as the place to go in your locality to get developed, to get an opportunity for title advancement, that is going to ring loudly within the marketplace. And younger government workers are much more likely to change jobs than they were before. I think we know this. This is probably a redundant slide. Statistics show that millennials are staying for about 3 years in their first role that they get in government versus 12 for prior generations. And skills are changing faster than ever. I think this might be the slide where it says, yeah, the developer skills that didn't exist 3 years ago. But this is crazy to think that the skills that you need, that have today, just in a couple years, they're going to be half different, right? Hard skills, soft skills. It's a dynamic situation that's changing extremely quickly. So what does learning success look like? How do we train all these people? Well, first off, something that's up to date. No microfiche printouts from your local library about how to do whatever it is that you do. Both employees and managers are driving the learning. This cannot be a forced top-down thing. You've got to want to encourage this development. And this is a tough one. You need to have leaders that can say, hey, I don't have enough skills for X. I need way more Y and Z. And that when you're doing this culture building, you're weaving learning into the framework of your culture. So people are thirsty to be developed, thirsty to find more information and career path. So what do people want today? Well, something that's immediately applicable, right? I think there's a statistic out there about if you learn something and then you don't put it into practice, you lose a ton of it. I don't know this math, but I think we all know that if you don't do something very quickly after you learn it, it's gone. I know nothing about trigonometry anymore. And they want to learn either deep, intense amounts of information, or they just want a quick bite. Anybody out there that has ever Googled, how do you fix X? Or Google or YouTube, I meant. How do you fix X? How do I get my wedding ring out of the trap of the sink, right? Never happened to me before, right? Those quick bites, sometimes you just want the information quickly. And they want it on their fingertips, they want it on their phone. Getting information to people when they want it, where they want it is not an easy task. There's ways to do it, but that's where you're gonna see the biggest, I guess, rubber hit the road for a cliche. And they want a collaborative learning experiences. God, these social butterflies, they want to collaborate while they're learning now? This is frustrating. But there are ways to do these things. This is what they want. I'm just, again, giving you the information that's needed today. How you go about it, there's a variety of different ways to do it. So all of those things together, when you're coming up with your plan, modernizing your hiring strategy, implementing a development curriculum while keeping your employees engaged so they stay and they tell the world about how great it is to work for the state of X, Y, and Z, or Commonwealth. Got to give my Commonwealth some respect, the Commonwealth of Z, Y, and A. Because people's expectations have changed. The why is in your favor. Why work for government is in your favor. That story needs to be told. The where and the how, that depends on your ability to have some flexible work and things of that nature. You got to find a way to make these equations work for you within the framework that you've been given. But it matters. Top performers produce more. Wherever this statistic's from, 400% more productivity out of top performers. My dad always joked, he goes, I used to find the busiest person in the law office and give a job to that person because they somehow managed the way to get it done. And then if you're finding internal mobility opportunities, people are going to stay longer, right? If that person gets opportunities, they're going to stay 3 years, now they're going to stay 6. That's actually meaningful, right? If you can give somebody a career path and they're staying 6 years instead of 3, that's a lot less attrition, hiring, churn and burn that you have to plan for. Oh, and there was one more. It was about upskilling, more about learning and development. We're talking about hiring, developing, attracting, retaining, and putting people at the center of this, right? We are human beings, and we all want the same things in life, and if we can plan to give people the opportunity to work in a way that they want is within limits, and finding a strategy that solves for both the business or government needs as well as the employees, that's where you're going to find synergies. All right, so your top talent priorities require a multifaceted approach, right? Lots of stuff here. So we talked about critical skills, supporting your leadership development. Developing future leaders is absolutely critical. I don't care if you're government, business, it is something you have to focus on. whether it's having some sort of emerging leader program or finding a way to, I know you can't like say, hey, you're going to be the next this, but finding a way to identify future leaders and giving them opportunities to grow and advance and role. Promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. I didn't focus a ton of this presentation on that subject matter, but it needs to be weaved into all of this when it comes to your culture, your employer value proposition, making people feel like they're not only here, but they feel like they belong. And the ERGs that hopefully you all have some way, shape, or form created in your organizations. Employer brand, culture, and then enabling your hybrid and remote strategy. All of these things, when bucketed and chipped away at, together will give governments an opportunity to compete for top talent, even in a hyper-competitive marketplace. I was at a conference not too long ago, and people were almost hoping for a recession, thinking that a tight labor or a looser labor market might help them with their open headcount. That's a short-term fix, unless you want to live in a permanent recession. That's not a long-term fix. Yes, that could help in the short term, but you need to find a way to evolve your strategies to have something that's sustainable long-term for the next 10 years, 20 years, not just for a, well, hopefully a small month-long recession. So I think I went through this slide deck a little bit quicker. No, we're not too bad. I don't know if we want to do Q&A. Is Pam in the room? Do you want me to do any Q&A if anybody has any? I've got a few minutes, it looks like, by my clock. So again, hopefully that was helpful, informative, maybe even a tad bit inspiring, maybe. But I'm happy to field any questions if anybody has any. Well, that's going to be awkward. We're going to be here for 11 minutes in silence. Man. All right, icebreaker.
Hello, good morning. Cara Griffith from Tandem Motion. As you know, we are a workforce strategy firm. One of the things that's been really interesting talking with some of the folks here, some of the budget officers, personnel executives, is making the business case for this. And so I think oftentimes, you know, technology folks, there's a line item in the budget where, okay, we're gonna buy this platform and, you know, we're gonna get something tangible out of it. When we talk about workforce and some of the soft skills, and certainly from a learning perspective, that's less tangible. And I think that personnel execs and maybe some of the admin folks in the room here are struggling to really make the business case to get the budget for this to move it forward. Do you have any insight on how to, you know, really tell that business case story so we can start to see some movement in this space?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing you can do, at least again, this is my off-the-cuff answer, is you are having a problem completing a project because of X, Y, and Z. People, talent, skills, otherwise. What does that cost to taxpayers, right? What is the delay costing? Every time we don't get this road paved, it's costing X, Y, and Z for, you know, local market development, whatever it is. So find out what the actual cost of the problem is, and then backing into how do we solve for it, right? What is the skills gap? Here are the skills we have. It's all, I'm a data junkie, so hopefully finding the data. Right? Here are the skills that we have. Here are the skills that we need, and because we don't have these skills, these are the problems that we're facing, and it's costing our taxpayers X, Y, and Z. That would be that's the way we've typically approached it with other governments that have tried to implement some sort of strategy. But some of this stuff also doesn't necessarily cost money too. Yeah, I mean, implementing an L&D or an LMS would, but culture building, brand building, I mean, just recognizing a job well done. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do for free as well. So that kind of sort of answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Secondly, we talked a little bit about hybrid telework, which I appreciate, thank you. We know that some of the states in the room, well, we all have a responsibility to help the governor fulfill their mission. And some of the governors that we see maybe in more that baby boomer demographic, and we know statistically that being in person is really important to that baby boomer demographic, that there are some cultural norms there that they're comfortable, right, coming back in person. So for states that have that kind of direction from their governors, where they may not have as much latitude to be able to offer hybrid work options, any recommendations, again, to help just manage up, without naming the states in the room that I've talked with that are struggling with this, any recommendations on how to manage up and maybe convince leadership that we need to move in this direction?
It's so hard. If you want to chime in with anything, please do. But one, your recruiters need to make sure they take close notes as to why they lost a candidate or why somebody's leaving. We've lost 35 people just today because they've been brought back into the office or because they took a job somewhere else that had. So you need to provide, again, statistics and data. And then showing them that we did this for a period of time and we were able to succeed. Some people use like work from home days almost as like not a bonus, but I know people that have a firm, strict policy, they've been able to find some flex here and there where they've awarded work from home rights or they've been able to do certain things. So it's a tough job. If you are fully back in the office and the rest of your talent marketplace around you is not, it's an uphill battle. But I think it's using data to tell your story and then also finding little kinks in the armor where you can plug in some flexibility because people truly do want it. And then you got to find a way to make the office environment engaging, fun, good leaders, inspiring leaders. It's a tough job if you're fully back in the office right now. There's no magic wand for that one, but hopefully that helps a little bit. I don't know if there's anything I missed.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah, and I think you referenced the baby boom generation potentially making these policies, and the data that we shared very much falls along those lines. I mean, it's fascinating to me. It's just there's so much divergence. But I think, as Jay mentioned, I think it's about looking at those trends in the workforce. I mean, you're going to start to see it. Our applicants are all this demographic. We're not being able. We're losing this many younger workforce people, which should be the people we want to come in. I mean, I spend a lot of my time talking to folks who are trying to hire technology type folks, and that's very much younger crowd, interested in some of these things that Jay's, and states are not attracting those people, which then you get into higher outsourcing costs and different things like that. So the more I think you can tie it back to what Jay said is, hey, we're not meeting our goals from a recruitment perspective, and that's having this sort of bigger impact on the state's productivity is the only way to address that. It's a challenge, especially when you look at civil service and in certain states, union guidelines and all these other things that go into it. It's a real challenge, but it's got to be one that's thoughtfully done because it will start to impede government progress over time.
Get the data though, exit surveys, and for why people didn't accept the job offer.
Yeah, this is more of a discussion question for maybe more of the people in the audience. I don't want to put my friends from Tennessee maybe on the spot, but I'm trying to look around the room and remember who was in Atlanta 2017. But the state of Tennessee, if I remember correctly, did a presentation on, they had established a telework office, right? Christy, do you guys still have that? Yeah. And that was kind of a novel idea in 2017. I was still the state member from Oklahoma, and I was looking at it kind of from that perspective, like, I don't know, sending state employees home. And I remember something that they said, and I wrote it down. I took it to my office, and it said, work is what you do, not where you're at. Fast forward into leading a team through pandemic, and my question was more in line with, what did your agency or the team do? You all just seem to be more probably prepared at the time going into that. And then for other states coming out of it, and did you end up standing up teams similar to that to get other agencies capable of teleworking? And what are you doing moving forward as it is relative to some of the things that the gentlemen have discussed today? So more discussion to the room.
So that's a lot. So our AW, yeah, right. So, and I have spoken about this quite a bit at other NASCA conferences. So those of you who are tired of hearing it can just go ahead and tune out. But we started Alternative Workplace Solutions 2015-16. We were just talking about that with our friends here from Pennsylvania. And it grew from there. It was really about being in a place where, and working in a way that helps you best serve your clients, your customers. Excuse me. And so it was a hybrid model, work from home, work from a job site, some days in the office, some days at home, 2 to 3 days, one way or the other. And we were able to reduce 1 million square feet out of our real estate portfolio in office space in the downtown area. And so that was the start of it. And then really the pandemic, as we were just explaining to them, just put all this on steroids. It just went crazy. And so it was really up to the commissioner of each department whether to join in and engage with AWS. We had several, I'll call them old school commissioners, who still managed by looking around the room and making sure they saw someone's rear end in a seat. And through the pandemic, when we started cutting budgets, of course, they all said, you know what, we don't need this much real estate, because we were pretty adept at being able to pick up our computers and just go home and continue working. And so when we did that, everyone took their computers home and just quit working, except for those, of course, who are working in postal and printing and worked with large equipment. So, but when we cut budgets, because we all thought the world was coming to an end, yeah, they said, you know, we don't need this real estate. Let's go ahead and engage with AWS. And some of those commissioners who were very hesitant about doing it have all engaged now, and some of them are the biggest proponents for it. So, but as a result of that, we're going to be reducing our real estate footprint in downtown Nashville and related areas by another 1 million square feet. So huge savings, and of course those are compounding savings, and you have operating expenses associated with that as well that go on and on and on. We're also getting out of a lot of leases. We had some leased space in downtown that we no longer need, and the private sector, because we were in a booming real estate market, is very happy to pick any of that. The landlords are probably like, adios, they're happy. And we're also being able to sell one office building outright, which again being in a hot real estate market's great because it's a big number. And we're looking at selling the second one. We're actually going to be ground leasing it. John, do you want to add anything to that?
No, the only thing I can add is, you know, we think it just comes from a basic philosophy of how you want to run your organization, is that if you really need to see somebody sitting there, you're not going to get people, we don't think. And for us, it just comes from our philosophy is we really do want you to go somewhere, whether you're with another agency, whether you're working from home, just be more productive doing that than you are just sitting in a cubicle inside a government office.
Oh, and there's one more thing, and I know people wonder, so how do you manage then? So we have a statewide strategic plan, then each department has a strategic plan, and then we have operational plans that feed up into each division, and each division has KPIs that we measure all the time, and we do quarterly check-ins on that, and then each individual has an individual performance plan. So that is how you manage. I mean, it becomes very obvious quickly who's not able to work from home. It's just not a good fit, and we have a place for them to come in the office and work. But otherwise, we manage with KPIs and the individual performance plans, and it's been very effective for us. I don't know the number, and I should, but DOHR did a study a while back, and they showed our effectiveness had increased pretty nicely. So.
Quick question on reclassification of work, especially for types of jobs that may not require a 4-year degree, a bachelor's degree. I know Ellington's here in the state of Maryland did get some, I think, very tangible increase in the qualified applicant pool by reclassifying some of those. Are you seeing that as a trend, or maybe a question for the states? Are you considering those?
I can speak briefly while somebody else wants the mic. Yeah, so I think it comes to a lot of different things. If you can, if the job you have does not require a 4-year degree and you're able to remove that requirement, you're gonna get more talented people. I also think your job titles sometimes can be less attractive, so not a direct answer, but finding whether, if you are required in your systems, your applicant tracking system, to have program manager 4, there's other places where you can make it be a senior program manager with a more traditional job title. So reclassification, absolutely, and then also just looking at your titles just straight away.
Yeah, I wanted to add that in the state of Maryland, the governor this year just announced that initiative. Thank you for indicating that he wiped away the requirement for college degrees on thousands of jobs, job titles, and the state has tens of thousands of job titles, so that will be a big benefit. And so we're tracking that through the Department of Budget and Management. But yes, reclassification, because we found it was an advantage for the department to really look and streamline our classification so that we can be the department of choice, so that we could raise our salaries and provide better value, to demonstrate better value to attract folks at least into the department. So we're trying to do that opposed to our sister agencies. So, but for Maryland, Department of Budget and Management handles that HR component. So thank you.
That's awesome.
Jack Howard. All right, Jack Howard, State of Maryland. As Ellington just said with the State of Maryland, fortunate for us, we have a governor who is in full support of the whole alternative work solution and hybrid. But to answer the question about data, you can have give the leadership all the data in the world, but we all, just quite bluntly and quite frankly, if you hear, as a political appointee, we all work in under a political structure. So if you're unfortunate enough to live in a state where the governor has made this a political issue, and he or she just wants to be able to go around the state and crow and say, well, I made all those state workers get their butts out of their homes and get back to work, you can give them all the data in the world, but it's not going to matter if they've turned this into a political issue. What Christy and John, the work they're doing in Tennessee is outstanding, and they're doing great stuff, and we are trying to do the same thing in Maryland, but there's some of our colleagues here I know, I'm not going to name the names of states, but there are some states who really have a governor who have made this a political issue, and which is ridiculous to do when it's all about the metrics, as you said. But if you're in a situation like that, it's pretty unfortunate. I don't know much you can do if you live in a state that has that kind of issue. Everything seems to be political now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
But
I mean, the only thing I could say is look at the governor's initiatives and tie back how you're unable to meet those initiatives because of workforce challenges that are related to then not being in the office. It's a daisy-chained approach, but if they're gonna, I don't wanna say play the political game, you need to too. But if what they hear is more political type approaches, talk about their initiatives that aren't getting done because of workforce challenges that are brought upon by requiring people to be in the office. I'm not gonna say it's a silver bullet, but I know people that have tried to say, okay, well, I can play that game too. Do we have time for more questions? Una mas? I don't know if it was deferring to Bob. All right.
I was just going to add, NeoGov did a recent survey of our HR directors across the country. This is state, city, and local governments. And what we found was the top 3 things that HR directors are trying to do right now is, number 1 is reduce minimum qualifications. Number 2 is your work hours flexibility. And 3 is remote work.
Yep. All right. Well, I don't want to stand up here any longer because I'm going to get a suntan from these lights. But I hope something that Ken and I said resonated, was helpful. You can bring back to your city, county, state, I guess it would be all states, to try and work towards whatever change or whatever something different it is that you all want to do. A lot of the stuff that I talked about doesn't cost money, which I know freemium and free is a great thing. Not everything is, but I know there's things that you can do. It takes effort, it takes some time, and it takes good leadership, but that's why you all are here. So thank you very much for your time. Really do appreciate it. We'll be around if you want to talk to us.